Generation podcast. I'm Dr. Lua Hancock. I'm the executive director of the Phoenix Generation.
And I am Samantha Romero, a UCF student with the Phoenix Generation. And we could not think of a better way to start our brand new podcast with our guests, Jeff and Daryl.
Yeah, so we're going to ask you just a little bit today to talk to us about your story and especially what advice you would have for youth. So maybe you could all start by just telling us a little bit about your background and what brings you to Orlando today.
Okay, well, I'm Daryl Davis, and I'm age 67. I'm from Chicago originally, but I grew up all over the world because my father was a U.S. diplomat with the U.S. State Department. And you get assigned to different countries for 2 years, and you come back home, and then you go to another foreign country for 2 years. So I started traveling around the world at the age of 3 in 1961. And my first introduction to school was abroad. So I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different schools in different countries. The in-between grades I did back home here. But when I was overseas, my classes were full of kids from all over the world. This little girl might have been from Nigeria, that kid from Japan, that kid from Russia, Czechoslovakia, whatever. That was my first introduction to school. So that became my baseline for what I thought school was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But every time I'd come back home, I was either in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. I didn't quite understand that because, if you were to open the door to my classroom overseas, you would say, oh, my goodness, this looks like a class of a United Nations of little kids. Right. That's exactly what it was. So one time when I came back was 1968. I was age 10 in the fourth grade, and I was in a newly integrated school. Now, desegregation was passed by our Supreme Court, Brown versus the Board of Education, in 1954, 4 years before I was born. But that didn't mean that schools just integrated automatically overnight. It took years. I mean, even today, in 2025, some parts of this country are still struggling with integration. So this was a newly integrated school. When I was 10 years old, 1968, I was one of 2 black kids in the entire school. Myself in fourth grade and a little black girl in second grade, that was it. So consequently, all of my friends were fourth graders, and they were all white. So some of my guy friends invited me to join the Cub Scouts, which I did. And I was the only black scout anywhere in the area. And we had a parade, and people threw rocks and bottles at me. Not everybody, just a small group of spectators. And my first thought was, oh, these people, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no precedent for that kind of behavior. It wasn't until my Scout leaders came running and covered me with their own bodies and escorted me out of the danger that I realized no other Scout was getting this special protection, just me. So now I'm trying to figure out what had I done to cause this. And I asked them, I said, well, why are they doing this? And all they would do is shush me and rush me along. And never answered my question. So when I got home, my mom and dad were putting Band-Aids and, cleaning me up. And they sat me down and explained what racism was. I never even heard the word at the age of 10 because it did not exist in my world, which is why it's so important to understand whether it's somebody's background like mine or a white supremacist background or whatever. Know the person where they came from. Know their background before you pass judgment on them. Because, I have a lot of detractors, for the work that I do, of course. People think I'm crazy or why are you sitting down with the enemy? You're a sellout, whatever.
Right.
But they don't know my background. I'm not accustomed to that kind of thing. And so this made me very, well, first of all, I didn't believe my parents. My parents were wrong. It had nothing to do with skin color, as they were telling me. And to prove that I was right and my parents were wrong, I pointed out the fact that the people on the sidewalk who were throwing projectiles at me did not look any different than my classmates who were all white, or my little American friends overseas from the embassy, or my Danish or Swedish or Norwegian or Finnish or Australian friends. They all look alike, Color had nothing to do with it. They assured me that it did. Not all white people were like that, but this is the case. And my 10-year-old brain could not process that I would hurt you just because you have brown hair or you wear glasses or something. It just was foreign to me. And then, so I didn't believe him. And then Martin Luther King was assassinated. And every major city in this country burned to the ground. I remember that. I remember it very well at age 10. And I realized this, when my parents were talking about this racism thing, this phenomenon I never heard of, is real. But I didn't know why. So I accepted its existence, but now I had to find out why. And I formed a question in my mind at that age, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so now I've been on a mission, 57-year mission, trying to get that answer.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty well.
Good. Yeah. Jeff, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jeff Scoop. I'm from rural Minnesota. My past is a little dark. I got involved in what would be a neo-Nazi organization or a hate group, National Socialist Movement. I joined that in my teens, like around 18. And within a couple of years, I rose through the ranks and became the national leader of that organization. I was involved in that world for 27 years total. So that's the negative background. But the more positive part of that story is that change was possible and being able to get out of that. Today, I run a nonprofit called Beyond Barriers, which helps get people out of hate groups, cults, gangs, works on all kinds of countering extremism, whether it's far right, far left, religious extremism. We've helped get people out of all those type of different environments. Work with the Simon Wiesenthal Center and the Museum of Tolerance and the Mobile Museums of Tolerance. So I go across the country and I speak at schools and talk to kids about not getting involved in these type of hateful organizations.
So I have two boys who are both college age, and I worry sometimes about our young men, and looking for community, looking for spaces to belong. What do you think pulled you into this movement, and what helped pull you out?
So what got me in, everybody has a different trajectory. For sometimes it's people looking for a sense of belonging. For some, it's like family, it becomes like a family. It's very cult-like, these groups, all of them. And I didn't know this until after I got out. I knew that the group was very homogenous in that sense, where it was very, you're in this bubble or this echo chamber, and everybody that's outside of it is the enemy, basically. So this is very cult-like, and that translates across all types of extremist groups, which was something I found pretty fascinating after I got out, because I thought, well, neo-Nazi extremism is unique. It is not. The psychological, how these groups hold people in place and keep them in there across all of those, whether it's something like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, or whether it's a gang, whether it's far left or far right, it's all the same in that. The politics are all over the place, but how they hold people in place is very similar.
And then talk to me about deciding, changing your mind and heart. That's a big change.
Right. So once you're involved in that, everybody that you know is involved in it. Everybody that's in your world, everybody that's outside of it is pretty much cut off. And a lot of times families will cut off people that are involved in it, or vice versa. So this echo chamber becomes stronger and stronger because it's all you know. So for leaving that group, to me, it was like leaving a war zone. It was like being at war with the world every single day, and you left. But how does that take place? How do you get to that point? Daryl Davis was the impetus for me. I didn't leave immediately after meeting Daryl Davis. It took time. It's a process getting out. Your mind goes through all these different things, all these excuses, reasons to stay. In my case, my career, my business was involved in the movement, so that was my livelihood and everything else. So there was, for different people, it's different things, but you have to leave behind everybody that you knew in this cult. I didn't like the term cult when I was in it, and I can tell you, when I was involved, girls that I was dating, one after another, were telling me, this is a cult. You're like the cult leader. This is a cult. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with these girls I'm picking? They all keep saying these stupid things. This is what I'm thinking at the time.
Right.
Why am I making these poor choices in women?
Right.
Well, I didn't look in the mirror and see it was the guy in the mirror that was wrong. There was nothing wrong with me, So this is very common thinking for people that are involved in it. They get really into this, they're right and everybody else is wrong. So when I sat down and I met Daryl Davis, I didn't know I was meeting Daryl Davis, because we knew who he was in the movement, because he's known for pulling people out of the Klan and other hate groups. And when I sat down with him, it didn't click immediately who he was. I was like, I recognize this guy and his name, but it didn't quite click, because I was thinking, I'm going to go into this interview and for this film, and I'm going to do my part. I'm not thinking about who I was meeting with. And then when it clicked, this is Daryl Davis, I thought, oh, this is the guy that pulls people out of these movements. So I started getting aggressive. I slammed my fist on the table. I said, I'll fight to the last bullet for my people. Daryl doesn't react. He doesn't push back. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get intense like you normally would in a situation. He just kind of goes, And then just keeps the conversation going. So I'm completely drawn in by this, and I'm trying to figure him out.
Right.
And then he shared the story, what Daryl just mentioned about what he went through in the Cub Scouts. And I'm thinking I'm part of this glorious, powerful movement that's doing this great thing for white people. And I heard that story, and it bothered me. So I tried to detach from it. So, well, that wasn't any of my members, or it wasn't me. It was just some bad people that would do that to a little kid, But when you take that apart and you start breaking down that and go, no, it's the ideology. And that was the thing that you always tried to put somewhere else in a box and say, no, those are just bad people that went and did those terrible things in the name of the cause. Well, you might be able to do that once or twice, but over and over and over again, there's mass shootings, there's terrible things happening, things like that happen. You have to start questioning the ideology. And that took a while to process that. So once you process that, then you have to start making the decisions. Now I'm seeing the wrong in this. Do you stay or do you leave? Everything you know and everything you've been, in my case for decades, was involved in this. Now my business, everything else is wrapped up in it too, and everybody I know. How do you break free from that? So that took a lot. It took time. It took a lot of inner strength, and it was difficult, but it was the right thing to do. So I didn't have any regrets about doing it. But it took time.
Yeah.
Also keep in mind, he was a member for 27 years, and within 2 years he became the leader of the group, and he built it into the largest neo-Nazi organization in this country, National Socialist Movement, the NSM. He recruited a lot of people. He had a lot of followers. He was the commander. That's their term for the leader. He was powerful. And all these people looked up to him, and they joined because of him. And so how do you then go to your constituents and say, hey, folks, I screwed up. I was wrong. That took a lot to do that.
Well, I think a lot of times in college, I worked on college campuses for a long time, is the first time we experience a lot of diversity. And actually for me, even as a person who grew up in a diversity and a diverse family, it was the first time I heard about some of this myself. Like I was surprised with what some other people were experiencing. And so I hear, people say, and there's all these protests recently or whatever, if you're not mad, you're not paying attention. How do you take that, but then also do the work you've done, which is that's not going to help me, though, to approach you in that way.
Right.
And in another individual, that's not going to help me with, you're speaking about an injustice that's real. I mean, this is real stuff that youth are dealing with. So then how do you stay in that lane where you're like, that is not just, and I'm going to approach you.
Okay, exactly. So here's how you handle it, okay? Our first, if we see something that somebody else is believing that's not real, they think it's real. The worst thing you can do is tell them that they're wrong. You're not real. That's not real. Black people are not inferior, or gay people are not inferior. That's wrong. You are attacking their reality. Right? You never want to attack anybody, even if it's not real. It's real to them, right? And they're going to defend it tooth and nail. And the more you attack, the more it's going to escalate, and finally it's going to, end up in violence, a clash, right? So you've heard the expression that one's perception is one's reality. Whatever somebody perceives is their reality, even if it's not real, it's their reality. So what you want to do is this: never attack somebody's reality. It's counterintuitive. What you do is you offer them a better perception, or perceptions, plural. If they resonate with one of those perceptions, they will then change their own reality, because that perception becomes their reality. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you have a little brother, and he goes, 7-8-year-old, he goes to a magic show with his buddies, comes home and tells you, you're not going to believe this. This magician asked for a female volunteer, and 50 women raised their hand. And he picked one out of the audience, brought up on stage, what's your name, where are you from? Climb into this long box and stick your feet up the hole there and stick your head up the hole here. And so the girl climbs in, the magician closes the lid, he's telling you, he takes a chainsaw and goes right through the bottom of the box. He cut her in half, Lua. And then he told her to wiggle her feet, and she wiggled her feet out the hole. You say, listen, that didn't really happen like that. Yes, it did. I was there. You weren't there. I saw it with my own eyes.
Right.
You have attacked his reality.
Right.
And he's 100% right. You were not there. You did not see it. He saw it. So how dare you tell him he didn't see what he saw?
Right.
Right? So he's getting upset because you weren't there. He knows what he saw. Right? And he goes on to make it even more obvious to you. After this man cut her in half, she wiggled her feet. He took the half of the box with the legs and the feet and moved it over here to stage right, and the half with the head over there to stage left. And then he walked over there and spoke to the woman's head, and she talked back to him. And then he brought the two halves back together. He did some abracadabra incantation over the box, and then opened the lid, and the girl climbed out. He cut her in half, put her back together, and there was no blood. And you say, listen, it's an illusion. No, it's not. I'm telling you. He's going to go off on you now, right? And next thing you know, you're all going to be rolling around on the floor, right? So don't attack his reality. He knows what he saw, and he's right. You were not there. You didn't see it. What you do is, but you know it's not real. In his mind, it is. So rather than attack his reality, offer him a better perception. Say to him, like Jeff likes to say, don't tell them, show them, all right? And let them come to the conclusions. So say to him, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question. Do you think that maybe, just perhaps, it's possible that the girl he picked out of the audience when all these 50 women raised their hand, that just maybe she works for him, and she knows the trick, and she travels all around the country, always sits in that same theater seat right to stage left over there, so that way he looks around, always zooms in on her, brings her up, right? And when she climbs into the box, there's already a pair of mannequin dummy legs that are wearing the same stockings and same stiletto heels that she has on, right? Lying on the floor of the box. So she just grabs the handles and sticks them out the hole so the ankles and shoes are showing, and she brings her knees up under her own chest. So her whole body is on that half of the box. So now when the saw goes through the box, it never even touches her. So when he says, wiggle your feet, she reaches over, grabs the handle in, and shakes them, and the feet wiggle outside the hole. And then when he separates the two halves of the box, those feet can no longer move because she has no more control over them. So he has to divert your attention from looking at those feet. So of course he's going to walk over here because you're going to follow him, right? And of course, he's going to talk to the head, engage with a conversation with the head, and she's going to talk back. Her whole body is in that side of the box. He doesn't want you looking at those dead feet, right? And then he brings the two back together, and she pulls those legs back in, leaves them on the floor, and she climbs out. And your brother says, that might be the only way that could work. You've offered him a better perception. He has resonated with it, and now that perception becomes his reality. It may be a little more work than just saying, no, you're wrong, but you're not accomplishing anything. So let him arrive at that conclusion by your giving him an example, leading him to that.
Yeah, real change has to come from within.
Right.
If it's forced change, or if somebody says, like, you're in a relationship and the husband says to the wife, you don't do this or else, or I'm going to take the kids, or something to that effect. That's not real change. That's going to harbor animosity. It's not real. Real change has to come from the heart and from the mind. And if the person realizes they've come to that conclusion themselves, that's when it sticks. That's when it becomes real.
I was thinking, talking about change. On to that point, change is gradual as well. Real change happens, but it's gradual, it's slow. And I wanted to know, I mean, for both of you, it's applicable, but looking back on all the hard work you've done, nothing happens instantaneously. How do you keep faith and hope that your work is going to impact people? And maybe even what are specific moments that you saw that spark and you thought to yourself, wow, like this is good. We need to keep on doing this.
Well, yes, you're right. Change does not occur overnight. All right. It occurs over time. It's like somebody who puts on weight. Okay, there's no magic pill you can take and lose 50 pounds by the time you wake up the next morning, right? You did not put that weight on overnight. You put it on gradually. Next thing you know, oh man, what happened to me? My pants don't fit anymore or whatever, right? You got to lose weight. You can go to the gym all day long. You might lose a pound or two, but you're not going to fit in those pants. It's going to be over time that you lose that weight. So change is the same thing, all right? You have to invest the time and make it gradual, because there are many factors, as Jeff pointed out. He said, he thought about changing, but there were so many things that he kept thinking, well, do I want to leave this behind, or are these people on the outside going to accept me, or this is my business, what am I going to do for my livelihood, blah blah blah. There are many reasons that are pulling him, trying to pull him back. He's trying to go this way, and they're trying to go that way. So you're always combating a new reality. It's like, and I don't want to paint people with a broad brush, but we all have seen women who've been abused by their husbands or their boyfriends or whatever, and their girlfriends or even some of their guy friends tell them, that guy's no good, you got to get away from him, and they keep staying there. Why? Because they are more comfortable with what they're familiar with than trying to change. All right? And finally, when the guy beats them within inches of their life, and hopefully he doesn't kill them, if he doesn't, finally they leave. All right? Finally I'm glad I got out of this. But then when they get into another relationship, it's a repeat of the first guy. Not every time, but I've seen this happen more times than not, where they find a similar person because they go with what they know rather than try to do something new. Something new is always an adjustment. For anybody, male or female, we have to open ourselves up to the idea, hey, you know what? I need a better life. And yeah, my whole family's here. Everything I know is here. My echo chamber, my support system. This is my family. They've always had my back. But they were wrong. I have to accept that. If they want to stay, that's their prerogative. But I want a better life for myself and my kids or my biological family or whatever else. So you make that decision over time. I think, and then the first time this Klansman, left, I thought it was a fluke. That's just interesting. Okay, move on. And then another one did. And then another one. I thought, well, I'm not the first person they've ever talked to from the other side. Mm-hmm. So what, and they didn't leave before, what is it that I'm doing? And I think I review all these conversations in my head, these interviews, and that's where I came up with this. I've done a lot of traveling. I've been to 64 countries on 6 continents. All right. In fact, let me give you my favorite quote of all time. It's by Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens was his real name, right? The author. He had a lot of great quotes. This is called the travel quote. Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." That is so true. So if I had not had all that travel and all that exposure to different people, would I be doing this work today? Maybe not. Maybe I would be staying as far away from those people as I could, because those people, they might want to attack me. So let me just stay over here. They can stay over there, kind of thing. But because I've been exposed to people who look like those people, who treat me very well, then I can't paint a broad brush across everybody, right? So I began reviewing, and what I realized was no matter how far I had gone from my own country, the United States, whether it's to the other side of the globe or the country right next door, everybody I encountered, regardless of their religion, their ideology, their culture, was human. And every human, I've never met an alien yet, but I'm sure they might require these 5 values too. I would try to apply them. Every human being wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly and truthfully. We want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family. If we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or culture or society in which we are uncomfortable or unfamiliar, I know, I can guarantee our navigation of that society, that situation, that culture will be more positive, more smooth, and more productive. And I realized that's what I was doing. Now, where did I get that from? If I had to guess, I would say from just being around my dad and his job all those years in the Foreign Service, State Department. Because my father's job as a U.S. diplomat, the State Department sends him to a foreign country to foster better relations between that foreign country's government and the U.S. government. And how is that done? Through diplomacy, through conversations, through respectful conversation. You may come from different backgrounds, different beliefs, etc., but you have these get-togethers, these conversations. The diplomatic corps, like when you join the State Department, you do this stuff. You'll be going to cocktail parties every night with dignitaries from other countries and things like that, and you're getting to know things on a social basis, and it's gonna blow apart every presumption you had about somebody. The things you read about them, what you assumed about them because you saw them in the movies. Listen, I lived in Africa, for example, for 10 years. Every time I came home as a little kid, after 2-year assignments in certain countries, when you go around the room, where you from, where you come from, blah, blah, blah. Well, I just got back from, Ethiopia or Ghana or Guinea, Senegal. Kids, my classmates would ask me, did you see Tarzan? Because that's all they know, So it blows apart these presumptions. I realized that these 5 core values, I was using them. And I got them, I guess, from just being around as a little kid, in my house at cocktail parties, seeing how my parents were interacting with people. I wasn't thinking about it at the time, of course. But, when you're around it for so long, it just, osmosis.
Jeff, one thing I've heard you speak a few times, I've always wanted to ask you is, you went through pretty transformational change in your life. How does it feel to look back at your younger self? I think it's really brave to get up on stage and say, hey, I held these beliefs. I held them. I said, not just did I hold them, I pulled other people into them. I led them. That's really dramatic change. When you look back at your younger self, what do you think about that? How do you process this change?
It was, well, first of all, getting up in front of a crowd of people and admitting that you're wrong is got to be one of the hardest things for me, anyways. It's one of the hardest things I ever done. Early on, when I first made the announcement after I left the movement, and I took some time to process everything, and because originally when I left, I said I was retiring, and that was a tactical decision.
Okay. Because
I knew the threats would come in. I knew I wanted to speak out, but I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know anything about civilian life. My civilian life started in 2019.
Oh, okay.
I was at war with the government, with everybody, the world, from my teenage years up until then.
Right.
So I didn't know what that looked like. I just knew I wanted to speak out against it once I figured out that I was on the wrong side of things and I was putting wrong out into the world, putting hate and divisiveness and just things that weren't conducive to a healthy society. So I didn't know what that looked like. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is a international human rights organization, Jewish human rights organization, had reached out to me within 2 days of when I put out a website and said I was going to speak out against this, and I denounced the movement. And within 2 days, Director of Research Rick Eaton was on a plane to Detroit to come meet with me. And he had, went through their vetting process, and I met with him, and I remember telling my girl before I went out to meet with him, and I get a lot of laughs about this in the Jewish community when I tell this story, but I said, I told her, if I don't come home tonight, it means I'm on an involuntary extradition to Israel. That the Mossad kidnapped me or something, now that I'm out of the movement and, here that, I don't have this movement behind me anymore. So I didn't really think that, but there was that little voice in the back of my head, what if?
Yeah.
Because they were known, Simon Wiesenthal was known for hunting down old Nazi war criminals. So that's where my mind went, immediately. When I sat down with Rick and got to know him and learn about the mission of the Wiesenthal Center and know that they're doing all this educational stuff with youth and all that, and I thought, wow, I didn't know that. All I knew was the Nazi hunter aspect of it. I didn't know they were doing all this educational stuff. I thought, this is a wonderful organization. This is really interesting. So he says, what do you want to do with your life now that you're out of the movement? And I said, well, I have all these, I have these leadership skills. I have some business skills because I ran a record label, but they've not been applied in the real world. They've only been applied in that. I said, but I know I want to speak out. I want to be a peace builder. That's all I knew what now I obviously know it's a little more than that, but I just wanted to be a peace builder. I wanted to fix some of the damage that I'd done with my past and bring people out of that life and bring people together. And he says, he goes, well, you know, do you think you're ready to speak out? And I said, I've been speaking all my life. Easy. 25 years of this is what I do. I'm a public speaker. No problem. Easy. And he just kind of raised his eyebrows and looked at me. He goes, I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think. And I was like, why not? You know, I was just kind of a little, I'm trying to think of the word. Cocky is the word that comes to mind. I was a little cocky about it because I was confident in my abilities. And he says, you're used to speaking politics. You're used to speaking out, you know, railing against illegal immigration and all these different things that the movement does. You've never once gotten in front of a crowd and spoke about yourself, and especially what you've done wrong in life. And I thought, okay. And I didn't really think about it until the first time I was in front of a crowd of people that I dehumanized. And this was in California at a state legislative session on hate crimes, on increasing hate crimes in the state. And just before I went up and spoke, somebody had asked me, they said, how do you feel being in this area of California? And I said, what do you mean? How do I feel in this area? He goes, well, you know, your organization was highly active in the streets in this neighborhood, this area. I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that until that moment. I was like, oh my God, yes, we were active in this area. So now I had a couple notes and things I wanted to say that I was going to speak about. And I was just like, put the note card down and apologize. That wasn't on my notes, but I was like, I got to apologize to this community for who I was and the damage that I did to this community. And it's difficult to get in front of people and admit that you were wrong, but it's the right thing to do. And if it can empower others and help fix some of that, then it's worth it. But it's hard.
Think about the dynamic also. The very people that he was anti, Jews, Muslims, blacks, whatever, were the first ones to reach out to him and bring him in and saying, hey, you know, let's try to do something together. Rather than, well, got rid of one, he probably never changed, because he has a lot of detractors too. You know, some people just don't want to believe things. People beg for hope and change, but then when it happens, they doubt it. You know, they're eternal doubters.
Yeah. Well, and I've always wondered with you too, Daryl, how does it feel when, and I know that there's these fundamentals and values of love, recognition, respect, but not many people in their life are going to have someone hand them their Klan robe and hood, right? I mean, that's like a moment. Like what is that like for you?
Well, let me go back to the first time. Okay, the first time it happened, I was like, whoa. The guy was going to throw away his robe and hood and all this Klan stuff. And I don't know why to this day. I just said, no, don't throw it away. You know, give it to me. I don't even know why I said that. And he goes, what, you going to burn it? And I said, no, I'm not going to burn it, you know. And he goes, why would you want to have it? You know, because he was going to put it in the dumpster outside the apartment. And I said, I don't know. I just want it. So he put it all in a hefty green trash bag, all his certificates and this, that, and the other, and gave it to me. And I didn't know why I wanted it. I just knew I wanted it. And because I've seen him in his regular clothes. He's like meek and mild and stuff. But then when he puts on his Klan robe, he's at a rally or marching. It's like Clark Kent and Superman. It somehow empowers them. And I knew there was no power in the robe and hood. It made him feel powerful. But something told me, you know, I wonder how I'd feel in that thing. So when I got it home, I took it out and I put it on.
No.
Yeah, I did. I put on that robe and I put on the hood and I stood in front of the mirror and see if I felt any vibes, you know, it made me powerful. And I didn't, and I looked stupid, so I took it off. And I took it down. Now, my basement, the bigger half is finished. I have band rehearsals and stuff. And the other half is where you do laundry, you know, it's unfinished. And so put on a hanger and I hung it on one of the rafters. And I would see it every day when I go downstairs to do laundry or get fresh clothes or iron or whatever. And then it became a part of the fixture. I walk by but not see it. It was there, but I just wouldn't see it. It's part of the fixture now. Every 4 months, my water meter reader guy comes. And he always knocks on the door if I'm home. If I'm not home, he leaves a card for me to fill out. But if I'm home, hi, Mr. Davis, and he goes downstairs, gets the numbers off my meter. Bye, Mr. Davis, and a week later I get a bill. And he came. Hi, Mr. Davis. And he went on downstairs, and when he came back, he didn't even say bye. He kind of gave me a funny look. And then he went on out the door. That's odd, I hadn't thought about it. But I was going somewhere later on. I kept thinking about that water guy. What was up with him? He wasn't very funny today. Oh, shoot. He saw that clam moving in the basement. He's wondering, what the heck is going on here? So, I went downstairs. When I got home, I took it off and I put it in the closet. But since then, I've got tons of those things, tons of them. I keep them off-site. Because people threaten me, they want them, it's Klan property, you can't have that stuff and all that. So I lock them up somewhere else.
Yeah, there was one in the Holocaust Museum when you came before and had an exhibit there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was standing there with it one time, and I thought...
Scott Shepherd's Road.
Yeah, and I had met Scott, and I thought, most people never have the opportunity, many people never have the opportunity to be here with something that you have a lot of thoughts about, but maybe have never seen in person. And then I knew the person who was in it, that I had seen him too. And even myself, who likes to think like, oh yeah, I could talk to anybody or whatever, had this moment where I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I know that there's a person behind there, and I do believe that all of us have the right to be heard. I think also a lot of students feel like, yeah, but that person denies my own humanity. Like, how am I supposed to talk to them, So this work is like really profound. I think people experience it on all different levels. Sometimes it's, I disagree with these political beliefs, but all of it is somehow dehumanizing. Like today we hear so many people say, oh, those politics are stupid. The way they thought about that is so dumb. Those people, that's so dumb, And so I think it's great for us to be able to talk to youth about how even that is dehumanizing, even though it's small. But that could change into you not feeling like that person is worthy. And I think sometimes even in my own righteousness, I have felt that, you know what I mean? Like I'm better than someone who isn't as evolved as me or something, So I think it's so good for us to talk to youth about this work. And I think, we'll wrap up here in a minute. But one thing you said, Jeff, I heard before, and I heard again today that has stuck with me, is that if there's a rally or some kind of hate event where a lot of hate is being spewed, I want to be in those people's face and tell them, like, stop doing this, or this isn't helpful. And what you shared about that changed the way I look about that. Can you share like what you think people should do when this comes up in our own community?
Well, I can share what my opinion on it, because there's a lot of people have their ideas on this, and they think, are you telling us not to protest? And it's not that. But I can tell you from the perspective of the movement, and this was a story that I shared earlier, was whenever there was a rally and there was violence, that translated into recruits. So if we were attacked, the group that I was a part of had very strict rules. You could not hit anybody unless you were attacked first. We knew to stay within the laws. I'm not saying everybody always stayed within the laws, but at rallies they did. But if the left would attack us, then you could fight. Now, if somebody was on the ground, you can't kick them or something like that, then that's going too far, but you could fight. And that's why people were coming to the rallies. They wanted to have that opportunity. So whenever there was rallies and there was no fighting, there was no violence, or people were far away, the morale was down. Whenever there was even bad violence, either the night before or the rally, attendance was up and recruits were up and media coverage was up as well. So there was one rally in specifically that was in Mississippi, and the police had kind of cordoned off the area. So it was NSM and Klan in this area, and there was nobody in the audience. There was cops out there, and that was basically it. There was nobody there. And the morale of everybody that was up there, I'm looking around and going, uh-oh, we're not going to have people at the next rally. This is how I was thinking as a leader. The NSM at the time was, we're going to struggle to get any of these people back because we're not talking to anybody. We're not accomplishing anything out here. This is doing nothing. We're just like shouting at the wind. And that was a concern. So if people really want to take the wind out of these groups' sails, don't give them publicity. And I always tell the press this as well, because they're like, well, we have to cover it if there's violence or there's these things. So yeah, you can cover it. Don't name the group. Because every time, like if they say a Nazi party came to town or something, then we were always like, dang, because they could find another group or something like that online. It might even be a group that's a mail order, one man organization, But if they named us, every time we were named, it translated into recruits. So this is why these groups do publicity stunts. This is why, like the group I was in would go to historical battlefields, state capitals, into LA, different places where there would be lots of friction. And the more loud and rowdier, the more recruits, the more people that were coming in. So if you want to if you don't want them to recruit, don't feed into those narratives, and definitely don't get violent because they're just waiting for that. There was people that would come to rallies and just be like, please let Antifa hit us, please. They'd just be praying for it, because then we can start cracking skulls. And that's what they, wanted to be able to do, legally speaking.
Let me dovetail onto that. So back in 1982, the American Nazi Party, which was the party that spawned a lot of neo-Nazi groups, including the NSM, they were formed in Arlington, Virginia, right near where I live. And the head of that party, I met him one time. He came to my school in 1974. And I was 15. And he spewed all this hatred and stuff. And I'd never heard an adult talk like that before. And it fascinated me. Not that I agreed with him at all. But I did not confront him in the classroom that day. So 8 years later, I'm now graduated high school. I've now graduated college. I felt the need to confront this guy. I sought him out. And I went to him and I talked to him. I confronted him. And he had a rally in D.C., the American Nazi Party. And they're going to, march down Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House and stuff. And so tons of people came. I mean, thousands and thousands. And they came with bricks and baseball bats to beat the Nazis, right? So my secretary and I went down there, and we watched the melee. It was a riot. People were turning, they didn't call them Antifa at the time. They were just, left-wing protesters or whatever, or anti-Nazi protesters. And they were turning over police cars, bashing up the headlights and windows, setting buildings on fire in downtown D.C. Now, back then, you didn't have cable TV. You had NBC, ABC, and CBS. So the police began attacking everybody. I got hit with a baton. My secretary got hit for just standing there watching. And we got tear gassed, and the tear gas had something called CS gas in it. So not only do you start crying, but you start itching and you start scratching, and you will scratch until your skin comes off. This gas is CS gas is a skin irritant they use in the Army to make people scratch their faces and stuff. So anyway, enough of this, let's go. So we go home and we're watching the 6 o'clock news. We even saw ourselves walking by in the riot. And there's the Klan leader sitting in the studio, the NBC affiliate studio for Washington, D.C., and they're showing footage of the riot that day. He says, you see, it's the blacks and the Jews who are overturning police cars and setting buildings on fire. You don't see any Nazis committing those crimes? It was then that I realized, this is the guy that I know. It was then that I realized, this is a smart guy. Not smart in the sense that what he was doing was right, but shrewd. I realized what he was doing. He didn't want any of the Nazis to start anything, but he would have, and why he called this the National national recruitment rally for the American Nazi Party. He's holding it in Washington, D.C. this year. Why would he hold the Nazi recruitment rally in Washington, D.C.? Washington, D.C. is 2/3 black. There are no black people in D.C. who want to join the American Nazi Party. There are no Jews in D.C. or Jews anywhere who want to join the American Nazi Party. So why D.C.? Because he knew that would happen. There would be protests. There would be violence. And he told his people, don't engage unless, you're touched, right? So now he has all this official footage from CBS, ABC, NBC. He takes that footage out to the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Oregon, Washington State, and shows it in these rural communities. You see what's going on in our nation's capital?
People's fears.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
He says, our country is being run by Zog. You know what Zog is? Z-O-G?
No.
It's the white supremacist term for Zionist occupied government. So you see, you don't see any Nazis doing this. These people are taking away our rights, our right to freedom of speech, our right to freedom of assembly.
And that's been replayed and replayed.
And guess what?
Yep.
The recruits come in.
Yep.
Right.
Because hate comes from fear. It's like, this is what we would show horrible videos, and we did exactly the same thing. The Toledo riots, the NSM was spurred those on, and other things like that. And then we'd show people those videos. Or we had a street fight in New Jersey that was filmed, and or Antifa came in and was attacking us with bats and and hammers and all this kind of stuff, and people got all bloody, and then you show people that, and you go, this is they're after us. They're going to try to kill our families. So get involved. So this all feeds like this vicious cycle.
Yeah, and like you said, which I think is so important for people to know, when you're in something like this type of movement, you feel like you're right. It's not like you feel like you're wrong or doing something bad. You feel so justified, maybe even that you're the minority who gets it, who's going to fight for something and I think we have to understand that. Yeah. Do you want to ask a closing question, Sam?
A closing question. For me as a college student, I think everything is kind of centered around youth and just the journey as we become adults and seeing the hard work that you guys have done over the year. The years, we're just beginning. And I guess I wanted to ask, Daryl, how did you stay? Well, the question really is, there's been times when things didn't go the way you planned and moments that, probably discouraged you. How do you stay on your task and continue to do the work that you've been doing?
Because, everybody's an individual. And there are people, I never thought that I would have some of the detractors that I had. People are individuals. And so that there are going to be people who will go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist on all sides. There's probably no changing them. But the people who are hateful, violent, and racist, if they're willing to sit down and talk with you, there is an opportunity to plant a seed. The seed might not bloom overnight. It might not even bloom by next week, maybe not even next month, maybe not even next year. But at some point, it might bloom, especially if you keep coming back and watering it. All right? And so when one person changes, it makes all the difference in the world. Okay, so that one fell by the wayside. I'm going to move that person down on my list of priorities. I'm going to keep talking to this one. And that person, he may come back or she may come back and want to talk to you later on. I've had that happen. And I've also had things happen where two people, they both are very hateful, violent, and racist. One will talk to me, one won't talk to me. And the one who gets out, I'll give you an example. Okay, so Jeff got out of the thing, right? And there was one of his members contacted me and saw how well Jeff was doing and told me he wanted to get out. Okay? He wouldn't have gotten out if Jeff hadn't gotten out. So some, I'm talking about ARC, right? So even some guys who have gotten into fights with or whatever, they see their buddy who got out because of me, and then they come back to me and say, hey, can we talk? Things like that. So that's very rewarding. But I know that not everybody is gonna leave, and that's okay. The ones who do leave, they will make a big dent in society for the better. Those who won't, as Jeff told you, they end up in one of two places: prison or the graveyard.
And Jeff, in our movement, the Phoenix Generation movement, we talk about this chain of history. There have been people who have done work before us to try to create peace and unity. There'll be people who do work after us. As you think about this generation, what their chain is, what advice do you have for youth today?
Never give up. Always keep trying. Seeds can be planted. You don't always know that. Most people in an argument aren't going to say like, oh yeah, I was wrong, you were right. They have to like process that, and it takes time. So a lot of times you may not even know it, but you're planting seeds that can take hold later, and those can really help. And I just real quick, I want to say, this last year I helped a family with 11 kids under 18 years old walk away, and these were people that were in my old organization. And we had been talking with the wife for a little while, but she couldn't quite get through to her husband, and they started seeing what racism was doing to their kids in school, and how they were having to interact with other people, and how it was holding them back. And he finally gradually started coming around, and these were also pretty high profile people in the movement. This family was the father was a regional leader, which means he was in charge of about 5 states. They flew a swastika flag in their yard. Everybody in the whole county knew who these people were, and around, and they left too. So it's not, it can happen. And these were people that were involved a long, long time. And so there's people of all ages that can change, but we don't want the youth. If we can avoid it through education, youth getting involved in this stuff in the first place, that's the game changer. Because we don't want them to have to get to most of them aren't going to make it to the point that I did. You're going to end up dead or in prison. So, and that goes for cults, gangs, all these different things as well. You don't last in those typically. So.
Just 2 quick things. This has happened to me 6 times, where I've spoken to a middle school. And I spoke to one years ago in Maryland, near where I live, to an 8th grade class. Years later, I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, giving a lecture at this university, and this sophomore kid there comes running up to me, Mr. Davis, you spoke to Professor Steckel's class. I'm thinking, Professor Steckel, that's back in Maryland. I'm out here in North Dakota. And I said, You know Victor Steckel? Yeah, I went to Green Acres. That was the name of the school. He goes, you spoke to my class. I said, oh, well, hey, you're here now. I go, yeah, I'm a sophomore. He goes, you're here because I told the Student Activities Board about you, and they brought you in. Something I said to this 8th grade kid, who's now a sophomore in college, has stuck with him. And he's told the School Activities Board about me to bring me in to speak to the college. Like Jeff said, you never know where the bloom might happen. Of course. And that's very, very important. And I'd like Jeff to close out with, I was there when I saw this. It was wild. On a positive note, Duke. So Jeff and I, we did a thing, and when Jeff first left the movement, I had a lecture in New York, and I invited Jeff to come and be on my stage with me. And so he invited one of his former neo-Nazis, his bodyguard, to come and see us. I didn't know the bodyguard, but I met him that night.
Yeah, so his story was he was chief of security for me for a number of years, was in the party for a long time, and this is a love over hate story. So his father's nurse was an African-American woman. And so she was a friend of the family, had stayed around. He had done security for her as well, as she was a movie actress, like horror movie film actress. And he had gotten real sick, and he was in the hospital, and was, they thought it was cancer, and he was going to die from it. And she's in the hospital with him, and she wouldn't leave. And he's like, Catherine, you don't have to be here at the hospital with me. You can go home. I'm going to be here for a while. And she says, I'm not leaving this hospital until you walk up out of here and you're better. I'm staying with you here. And he was just like, I don't understand this. I don't understand this. And she says, I'm going to pray for you, and you're going to get better. And by the way, I'm in love with you. This is the head of security for the NSM.
Right.
And he says, when I walk up out of this hospital, I'm going to marry you.
What?
And they got married. They're still now, I don't even know how many years it's been, probably 10 at least. I'm terrible with dates and times. It's like 10, 15, long time. And they're still together. I just seen them a couple weeks ago when I was in New York giving talks, and they are like high school sweethearts. They are just the greatest, awesome couple. That's love conquering hate.
I love that. And this is what we try to tell students, just one relationship at a time. If you can figure out how to have loving and curious and courageous conversation with someone, you never know how it's going to help not just them, but maybe you as well in the process. So I would highly encourage you all to check out, Jeff has a book that's going to drop in just a few days. So please, if you go to the link at our website, Jeff's book, American Nazi, From Hate to Humanity, comes out later this month. Daryl also has several books out and an award-winning film documentary, Accidental Courtesy. All of those links are in our podcast notes, and we would love for you to listen to those. If you enjoyed these podcasts today, please share it with another youth. Share the love, share the stories, and we'll see you at the next Phoenix Generation event.